Imagine one morning you wake up and find out someone else has put your land online for sale, and that someone else is your own HOA board. This all happened to me. I was calmly doing my work when a stranger came to my gate and said, "Brother, your plot is for sale. I came to see it." I thought he was joking. But when he showed me the listing on his phone with my address, my land's photo, and an extremely low price, my breath stopped. This was not just fraud. This was the biggest betrayal of my life. The HOA, which is supposed to handle only rules and upkeep, had tried to sell my property as if it were theirs. But one thing they forgot. I am not an ordinary owner. I am a lawyer. And the trap they had woven for me, they ended up falling into themselves. This is the story of how they tried to sell my land, and how I turned their entire game upside down. I always looked after my land with respect and love. It was not just a piece of land. It was the result of my family's hard work, proof of my savings, and an asset for my future generations. When I bought this plot, my dream was that one day I would build my own house here and create a secure future for my family. But this dream was not only important to me. The HOA, meaning the Homeowners Association, which in reality should only take care of the community's cleanliness, security, and maintenance, had its eye on this land too. At first they created problems over small things. Sometimes they said the boundary wall was too high. Sometimes they said the grass wasn't cut on time. I found it strange that they made such small issues about an empty plot. But I always ignored them. Then gradually their attitude began to change. At HOA board meetings, there was often a woman people called Karen, who always spoke against me. She would say that a community garden should be made on my land, or it should be sold and the money put into the society's fund. At the time, I thought this was just an opinion, nothing serious. But later I realized it was not an opinion. It was a hidden plan. One day I received an official notice. It said I had to submit my land records to the HOA. The reason given was that they wanted to verify them for community development plans. I immediately became suspicious, because no law or rule gives them permission to check my private ownership records. I set the notice aside and replied only, "This property is privately owned, and any attempt to interfere will be considered illegal." After that, they began trying other methods. Sometimes they sent me extra fines, sometimes they raised objections about my fencing. I thought maybe they wanted to harass me so I would feel pressured and sell the plot. But they did not know I was not an ordinary person. I am a lawyer, and the law is both my shield and my sword. During this time, I noticed another strange thing. Every time I met any HOA member, their words carried a strange confidence, as if they already knew I would hand this land over to them. I could not understand why they were so sure. Then the day came where the real story began. One evening I went to my plot to inspect it. There I saw two strangers walking inside the plot, measuring and taking photos. When I asked them, they said, "We are buyers. We were told this land is for sale." My eyes widened. I said, "This land is mine, and it is not for sale at all." They immediately said, "But the HOA confirmed to us that this property is available." At that moment, I realized the suspicion I had been ignoring for so long had become reality. The HOA had actually planned to sell my land, and this plan was not secret. It was being carried out via public listings. Anger and shock filled my heart. On one side, my property was being openly manipulated, and on the other, I was thinking, have these people become so blind that they are targeting me when I am a lawyer myself? Then I decided that staying silent was no longer an option for me. I would expose them, record their every illegal move, and prove that the HOA is not just a management committee. These people, drunk on power, are stealing residents' rights. After the buyers came to the plot, my night's sleep was gone. All the time, a question kept spinning in my head. After all, how is the HOA doing all this? And to what extent can it go? The next day, I decided to do some research. First, I searched on popular property websites, and what came in front of me blew my senses away. The picture of my plot, which I had taken myself a year ago, was posted there. In the description, it was written, "Spacious land, perfect for development. Price to sell fast." The price was half of the market value. Instead of the seller's contact number, it said HOA office. At that moment, I was sure this was no misunderstanding. This was an organized fraud. I immediately took screenshots and saved all the evidence. But I also knew online listings can be deleted anytime, so I involved a friend who was an IT expert. He said, "I will scrape the data from the back end. Timestamps and IP addresses will also be extracted. Then no one will be able to deny." After this, strange things started being heard in the neighborhood. One neighbor casually said, "I heard your plot is being sold? By the way, it's a good decision. It will fit in HOA's plans." At that moment, I gave a normal smile and said nothing, but inside anger was boiling. It was clear that the HOA people were not only planning, but also running propaganda in the entire neighborhood so that everyone would think I am willingly selling the land. A few days later, I noticed another thing. In HOA's monthly newsletter, there was a small line written, "New community project in planning. Pending land acquisition." My name or plot number was not written in this line, but I knew nothing matched more than this. This was an indirect hint that they were already considering themselves the owner of my property. My suspicion had now turned into confirmation. I just needed more solid proof. One evening I passed by the HOA office. There I saw Karen having a meeting with two agents. While showing papers, she was saying, "Don't worry, we have it under control. The sale will go through." I took a photo from a distance. This was the first golden piece of my investigation. That night I organized the evidence. Screenshots of the online listing, neighbors' talks, the mention in the newsletter, and Karen's photo. I started collecting everything in one file. I knew the time would come when I would have to show all this in court. But one problem was still left. I had to understand what their exact mechanism was. How were they presenting my property for legal sale? Because at some stage, every buyer needs to see the legal documents. In this confusion, I got another clue. I received a random email that perhaps was mistakenly forwarded to my address. The subject line was, "Draft Agreement, Lot Sale." When I opened the file, inside there was a fake sale agreement in which under seller, it was written, "Community Association Representative." The signature was blank. This was enough to confirm my theory. The HOA was ignoring my ownership rights and declaring themselves as the seller. They were fooling buyers, and one day when some actual buyer signed the agreement, they would force me to either go to court or leave the property. This plan was dangerous, and the most dangerous thing was that some people in the neighborhood were supporting them by being involved. At that moment, I felt that I had become alone. Betrayal was being felt from every side, but one thing was giving me strength. I knew the law, and I knew that in front of the law, their every single step would collapse. After seeing the listing, all the time the same question kept spinning in my head. How did the data of my land, my picture, and the price reach them? And who had the courage to put it in the open market? I decided that now staying silent was not an option. I needed evidence. The next day I went to the HOA office. Files and documents are normally not given to residents, but I submitted a formal request. The receptionist first refused, but when I spoke in a legal tone and said, "I am a dues-paying member of this HOA, under Bylaw 14, I have the right to access." Then she finally put an old file box in front of me. As I was flipping through the pages, one document caught my eye, a proposed sale agreement in which my property number was written. And below were signatures, but not mine. Forged signatures. My hands went cold. This was not just a mistake, this was clear fraud. I took the second step, talking to some loyal residents of the HOA. One senior neighbor secretly told me, "Son, last month there was a closed-door meeting of the board." Karen was very confident. She said that selling an unused lot would be beneficial for everyone. I understood that Karen was the mastermind. She had always been power-hungry. She interfered in every small matter, and now she had tried to directly grab land. I pulled out my phone and took photos of all the files. Apart from this, I recorded statements of residents who could become witnesses. Every single piece of evidence was a new part of the puzzle. But the more I was investigating, the more the HOA board started becoming suspicious. I started receiving anonymous emails. "Stop digging if you know what's good for you." And one day, on the glass of my car, it was written, "Drop it or lose it." This was a direct threat. But I was not the one to be scared. If they thought they could silence me by putting pressure, then they did not know me at all. During the investigation, the community also started dividing. Some people openly stood with me. "This is wrong, tomorrow our houses could be at risk." But some people were still under Karen's influence. They said, "The HOA always works for everyone's benefit. Maybe you are misunderstanding." I knew that until I made the concrete proof public, people would remain confused. One night I saw suspicious activity outside the HOA office. Karen and her two supporters were having a meeting inside. The lights were off, but through the blinds their faces were visible. I quietly recorded a video. The next day, when they tried to behave casually in front of the residents, I secretly showed them that clip. The color drained from their faces. I knew that now their game was about to end. I had documents, forged signatures, witnesses, and video evidence. Now I was ready for confrontation. I told my friends, now we have to face them in the public meeting. Now they will expose their reality themselves on stage. All the evidence was with me. Screenshots of the online listings, a copy of the fake agreement, and a photo of Karen meeting with real estate agents. I knew that merely gathering evidence would not be enough. It was necessary to confront the HOA face-to-face. The time for the monthly HOA meeting arrived. Almost all residents were seated in the hall. Usually these meetings were boring, long talks about lawn maintenance, trash pickup, and parking issues. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. I arrived with my file and sat straight in the front row. When the agenda started, Karen stood up in a confident tone and began, "For the future of the community, we are planning new projects. Soon we will have funds to improve security and add new amenities." People clapped. But I knew these funds would come from that fraud sale they were doing with my land. I immediately stood up and said, "Karen, where will these funds come from? Can you tell us?" She answered a little nervously, "Oh, we are talking with investors. Details are not finalized yet." Then I opened my file and placed a large screenshot on the table. It showed my property's online listing. In bold letters below it read, "Contact HOA office." Silence spread through the hall. Everyone looked at the picture and then at each other. Karen's face first went white, then red. "This is out of context," she said quickly. "This is a misunderstanding." I replied in a calm but sharp voice. "Misunderstanding? Then what is this fake sale agreement?" I took out the printed email and placed it in front of them. The agreement clearly stated, "Seller, Community Association Representative." Everyone was shocked. One resident shouted, "Wait, are you illegally selling our property?" Karen's confidence had fallen, but she was still trying to save herself. "We're doing this for the good of the community. Sometimes individuals need to sacrifice for collective progress." My anger was out of control then. Sacrifice? This is my land, my property. Who gave you the right to claim it as yours? And the biggest thing, you all did not know one thing. I paused and looked at everyone to make the moment heavy. Then I said, "I am not just a landowner. I am a lawyer. And I am telling you all that what you are doing falls directly under fraud and federal crime. I have saved every document, every screenshot. You did not just target my property, you challenged the entire legal system." Soft murmurs began in the hall. Residents who had been silent before started speaking against the HOA. "Are you exploiting us too? What is happening with our money? Karen, why did you never tell us the truth?" Karen made a desperate attempt. "Don't listen to him. He is twisting the facts. He is trying to turn you against your own HOA." I closed my file and looked straight into Karen's eyes. "Facts do not twist. Facts expose. And you have been exposed." The meeting atmosphere had completely changed. The other HOA members also appeared uneasy. They felt that if I brought legal action, they would all get caught in this case. I gave a clear warning. "Today, I have only come to show evidence. Tomorrow, this will all be in court. Decide which side you are on." After that day, panic spread within the HOA board. Karen tried to intimidate me, but by then the game had slipped from her hands. The confrontation was complete. The next step was the twist, the moment when I would use my full legal arsenal and completely dismantle the HOA's plan. After the confrontation, the HOA board was completely shaken. Residents had started doubting them, and Karen's confidence was shattered. But still, she wasn't ready to openly admit anything. For her, this wasn't only about ego, it was also about power and money. I decided that now was the time to show the real twist. Until now, I looked like just an angry landowner. But now I was about to reveal that I was a trained lawyer who had spent his entire career fighting fraud and property dispute cases. The next day, I drafted a legal notice. In this notice, it was clearly written that the HOA board had committed fraud with my property, made false representation, and created a sale listing without my consent. I cited multiple sections against them: fraud, misrepresentation, attempted theft, and harassment. The last line of the notice read, "Failure to respond within 7 days will result in immediate civil and criminal proceedings, with personal liability imposed on each board member involved." When this notice reached the HOA office, their faces turned pale. Karen called me, and for the first time, her voice had lost its authority. "Can we talk?" Maybe we can settle this internally. I sighed and replied coldly, Settle? You listed my property for sale as if it belonged to you, and now you want to settle? The court will decide this. After this, panic increased even more. A few days later, I received another email, this time from another HOA member. He confessed that Karen had manipulated everyone and told them, I'll handle the legal side. That member was now ready to forward me all documents to clear his own name. This was my masterstroke. Now I had a witness from inside the HOA itself who was ready to expose everything. I immediately filed a formal complaint with the postal inspector and the local district court. With the complaint, I attached all evidence, screenshots, the fake agreement, photos of Karen's meetings, and the HOA member's confession. When the first hearing day came, Karen walked into the courtroom with confidence, but her confidence broke quickly. When the judge asked her, On what authority did you attempt to list a privately owned land for sale? She had no answer. I calmly placed all the documents before the judge. Each piece of evidence shattered Karen's story. When the HOA's own member came to the witness stand and said, Yes, Karen instructed us to proceed with the sale without the owner's consent, the courtroom fell silent. For the first time, I saw the fear in Karen's eyes that was hidden beneath her mask of power. In a strict tone, the judge said, This case has elements of fraud and criminal intent. The matter will be referred to higher authorities. At that moment, I turned to the audience and said, I had already said, this is not just a land dispute. This is an example of how far an HOA can go to damage residents when they cross their limits. But the law is always stronger than them. My dialogue became a viral moment. The residents didn't clap, but their faces showed relief. They felt that, finally, someone had broken the HOA's monopoly. Karen and her supporters tried more tricks to intimidate me, but every move failed against my legal shield. I had evidence, I had a witness, and most importantly, the law was on my side. This was the twist where the game turned. Now, the HOA wasn't trying to defeat me, they were struggling to save themselves. The courtroom atmosphere was tense. Sweat was on the faces of Karen and her supporters. With every hearing, their position kept getting weaker. The evidence before the judge was so solid that no loophole remained. In the end, the judge announced his decision. The HOA's listing was declared fraud, a criminal investigation was ordered against Karen and her direct supporters. The HOA board was ordered to be dissolved. Immediately, my legal rights to the land were publicly reaffirmed. When the judge said, This HOA acted outside the law and must be held accountable, a voice rose in the courtroom. Yes! It was the voice of the residents who had silently endured the HOA's dictatorship for years. Karen's face turned pale. Her arrogance, her I-can-do-everything attitude all vanished. When she was taken out of the courtroom for the first time, her eyes showed regret. But now it was too late. After court, the residents surrounded me and said, Thank you. You raised your voice for all of us. We never even thought that anyone could stop the HOA. That day was a turning point. The residents decided together to create a new system in which, instead of the HOA, there would be a transparent community council. The job of this council was limited only to maintenance and safety, while property decisions were made by the vote of every owner. For the first time, everyone felt that their voice mattered. People began to look at their property with new respect. For me, this wasn't just a legal victory. It was the most emotional moment of my life. I had fought for my land and also for the whole neighborhood. I remember that night when I stood on my land, the wind blowing, and I thought, this is not just a piece of land. This is a symbol of my honor, my hard work, and my freedom. I realized that sometimes one person's fight changes the future of an entire community. For Karen and her supporters, this wasn't only losing a case. The investigation exposed their multiple other frauds. Fines, legal fees, and criminal charges destroyed their career and reputation. The women who once took pictures with Karen everywhere and praised her were now running away from her. Karen was left alone, a failed leader destroyed by her own greed. This story is not only mine. It is the story of all those people who fight for their property rights. HOA or any other system, when people misuse their power, they must be exposed. The law is always strong. Someone just needs the courage to stand up. Land and homes are not only investments. They are your identity and your honor. The message for all of you is this. If you feel someone is stealing your rights, don't stay silent. Gather evidence, raise your voice, and fight legally. You think you are alone, but behind you stand your community and the truth. And in the end, when I stood on my land again, I felt that I had not only saved a plot, I had defeated an entire system by challenging it. The HOA thought that by selling my land they would destroy me. But little did they know, this would become the story of their own downfall. This was my story, a land dispute that became the cause of freedom for the entire neighborhood. And one simple lesson, greed loses, and rights win.